Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Smithfields. I'm a medical lab scientist at the University of Vermont Medical Center. I'm also community co-chair. I was diagnosed with lymphoma in 2022. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be co-chairing this department, this conference. It is my pleasure to introduce today's panel moderator, Dr. Christa Varnadoe. Dr. Varnadoe is an associate professor at the Larner College of Medicine and works closely with our senior associate dean for research, Kate Tracy. Her current project is to develop an IRB-approved UVM Cancer Center patient registry. Dr. Varnadoe has published multiple scientific, peer-reviewed journal articles and presented at numerous conferences across the world. Dr. Varnadoe has a particular interest in clinical research education, oncology, global health research, with a focus on cancer clinical trials. I'm sure you'll have questions for Dr. Varnadoe and our panelists. When Q&A opens at the end of the session, Zoom attendees, you can chat your questions, and a volunteer will read them out loud. For in-person attendees, please wait for me to bring you a microphone so that our Zoom attendees can hear you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Varnadoe. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone who's here. So we have no disclosures or conflicts of interest with the material that's presented today. Here's our learning objectives, and let's go ahead and get started. So the National Cancer Institute Cancer Programs was created in 1971 to lead the nation's cancer research efforts. Today, it recognizes 73 cancer centers across 37 states and DC for setting the gold standard in cancer research, education, prevention, and patient care. Those centers drive discoveries that lead to better treatments, longer survival, and improved quality of life for patients nationwide. National Cancer Institute funding supports the infrastructure behind cancer research, including research teams, leadership, community outreach, and coordination, rather than just individual research projects. For more than 50 years, bipartisan support for the NIH and the NCI funding has sustained America's cancer research system. Thanks to these investments, cancer survival rates have increased by 34% since 1991, and an estimated 4.75 million lives have been saved since 1975. Simply put, NCI-designated centers make cutting-edge treatments possible, and these investments save lives every single day. In the U.S. 2020 census, Vermont was identified as the most rural state in the country, with 64.9% of the nearly 650,000 residents living in rural areas. Rural patients diagnosed with cancer in Vermont are 17% more likely to die from cancer compared to those living in urban areas. Many rural patients have to travel over 50 miles just to reach specialized care to participate in clinical trials. Financial burdens and challenges make things harder. Higher poverty rates, lower insurance coverage, expensive transportation, and lost wages all add up. Limited broadband access in rural areas create additional barriers for telehealth visits, virtual trial participation, and e-consent. The bottom line is we need to close these gaps so every Vermonter has equal access to life-saving cancer care and clinical trials. Behind every statistic is a person, a family, a story, and they all deserve better. Vermont has been a national leader in making cancer clinical trials more accessible. By requiring insurance coverage and advancing payment reforms, Vermont has helped remove financial barriers and prevent patients, that prevent patients from participating. Across the country, these efforts have contributed to a 27% increase in trial enrollment and a 42% reduction in patients withdrawing at any time during the trial due to the costs. These contributed efforts help to ensure more Vermonters have access to cutting-edge treatments and hope for the future. Right now, more cancer research funding in the U.S. goes toward developing new drugs, while much less supports studies that focus on patient care and improving quality of life. That's why it's so important to increase government funding for research that puts patients first. The state has Vermont has the third oldest median age in the nation, with 20.1% of the residents over the age of 65. Additionally, 73% of participants in clinical trials are aged 45 to 74, with individuals under 30 and over 75 significantly underrepresented despite their cancer burden. While the state's population is 92.4% white, minority groups are still disproportionately underrepresented in cancer clinical trials. Outlined here are the race and ethnicity representation gap in clinical trial participation. Recent federal budget cuts threaten cancer research across the U.S. A new cap on research funding could delay or stop important studies, slowing the discovery of life-saving treatments. In Vermont, however, innovative reforms are helping reduce barriers so more patients can access clinical trials and cutting-edge care. Cancer research saves lives, and every dollar invested protects those lives. Dr. Thomas?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Excuse me. I'm Alissa Thomas. I'm a neuro-oncologist here at the University of Vermont. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we have clinical trials at UVM. So as a neuro-oncologist, every patient I see, the very first question I ask myself is there a trial that could make this patient's care better? It's really that integrated in the care that we try to deliver. And there are several reasons for that. There are a number of reasons that clinical trials are designed. One of the obvious ones is we're searching for new treatments. And some trials are designed to try to find a treatment that will treat cancer better, help people to live longer, and offer new hope for cures and for the future of cancer care. Other trials are not going to find a new treatment, but might find a better treatment. So a drug that is easier to take, that has fewer side effects, that is better tolerated, and so you could have the same good outcome with a cancer, but with less trouble and side effects from the treatment. And so that's another good reason to do a clinical trial. And then some clinical trials are not so much focused on treating the cancer itself, but treating everything that goes along with it. So supportive care trials that really look at what is a person's experience with cancer, how can we help manage some of the other side effects that come along with it, like better management of fatigue, of nausea, support systems, care for the patient and family. So we have a number of trials that are really aimed at decreasing symptom burden and decreasing side effects. And then probably the broadest area of cancer research is thinking about trials that help us to understand disease better. And so these may not get at a new treatment for today, but may really help us to understand both the cancer and the experience of living with cancer so we can have better treatments in the future. These trials fall under a whole number of different things. Some of these are tissue trials, so you may be asked, can we keep a piece of your tumor to study for the future? We collect samples from a number of different patients to understand the biology. Some of these studies are based on epidemiology. Why are there certain cancers that are more common in Vermont than anywhere else in the country? Or is there something about a certain patient population that makes them at higher risk for cancer? And some of these are really about access. How do we deliver treatment in a way that allows people to get the cancer care that's available? So lots of different reasons to have clinical trials at the University of Vermont, but they kind of boil down to this. We're looking for new treatments, better treatments, safer treatments, and overall better care. If you're a patient thinking about a clinical trial, there's a lot of hope in trials, right? There's hope for the future. There's hope that we can do better with this. There's hope that we can have better outcomes. And you know, I think as a physician who runs clinical trials, I'm always looking for what is the next thing, because I think we can all recognize that for many cancers, we don't have cures. And unless we continue to look and search and move the research forward, we're never going to get there. So there's a lot of hope baked in to clinical trials. I think a lot of people ask, if there's so much hope, why is it so hard to get on? Why are the criteria so strict, right? And I think there's a balance of hope, but also the reality that clinical trials are experimental, they're based in science, and so each clinical trial has a very thoughtful list of criteria for patients who would be the best fit for that trial. And sometimes the trials are looking for patients who have tried a certain treatment and need to try the next one. Sometimes they're looking for patients who are right at the beginning of their cancer journey, sometimes in the middle, sometimes near the end. And sometimes the treatments are risky, and so patients who are very sick may not be eligible for the trial because there's just too much risk involved that if we make you sicker, we could actually make your life worse. So while there's a lot of hope here, there's also a lot of careful thought in who can participate in any individual trial. And all of that really boils down to the science behind this. So when we talk about clinical trials and we talk about research, there is an experimental nature to this, but hopefully not one that ever makes a patient really feel like a guinea pig, so to speak. Most clinical trials, and especially therapeutic trials that are looking at new treatments, have been invested in their science, often for 10 years or more before they ever reach the clinic and for patients. And so there's very rigorous behind the scenes testing of different drugs and different compounds, first in the lab, often in animal models, and then in multiple phases of research that really roll out the trials in the safest way possible. So clinical trials in humans usually start with phase 1 research, which is aimed at starting with low doses of new treatments and seeing how well they are tolerated and what the safety profile is. Then they move into phase 2 trials that try to figure out, are they working? Are these trials actually hitting the cancer in the way we think they're going to have an impact on that disease? And then phase 3 trials really move into figuring out, is this as good or better than what already exists? Are we actually making improvements on the care that we can deliver? As a participant in a clinical trial, you, the patient, are the point, right? You're at the peak of this. But there are many, many layers of the team that provide support and oversight to make sure that your experience on the trial goes as smoothly as possible and that the trial is conducted in a way that is organized, that is safe, that is ethical, that's really following the scientific integrity that the trial is designed to follow. And so you may meet a number of people on a clinical research team that you have face-to-face time with, your doctor, maybe the principal investigator, that's the person who's running the trial, and the research team. And we're lucky to have a lot of our UVM research team here in the room. So these are the research coordinators, the research nurses, the pharmacists, the nurse practitioner, different people who are involved in patient-facing care. Behind the scenes, there's a huge team of people here at UVM who help provide support for trials. Those include people in our clinical research office who are doing all of the regulatory work to make sure the trial runs smoothly, who are doing the data analysis and data collection, and who are providing oversight for the trial, as well as institutional oversight to monitor and make sure we're picking trials that make sense, that are scientifically rigorous, and that are relevant to cancer care today. And then there's even a layer beyond that of national monitoring by whoever sponsors the trial. So this is often a company who's designed the drug or the National Cancer Institute or some other organization supporting the trial, as well as the FDA. So this figure here is just meant to show you that when you're a patient on a trial, there's a lot of people that you see and interface with beyond your regular healthcare team, but many, many people behind the scenes beyond who you interface with who are really helping to make these trials run smoothly.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. So here at the University of Vermont, we have a diverse catchment area across both Vermont and New York State. We collaborate with academic cancer centers in New Hampshire and Maine, Dr. Thomas included. 60% of all our new cancer cases in our catchment area each year are seen by our oncologists here at the University of Vermont Cancer Center. 2024, 185 clinical trials open to accrual, addressing more than a dozen different types of cancers, including several for lung, breast, and skin. And those are the most prevalent deadly cancers in the University of Vermont Cancer Center's catchment area. So at the University of Vermont Cancer Center Clinical Trials Office, our patients are at the center of everything that we do. Pictured here are some of the incredible team members that I'm fortunate to lead. So for those of you who are from my team today that are in the audience, I ask that you please stand where you can be recognized and we can give you a round of applause. Okay, you can sit. Thank you. So as a team and a department, this is our answer to the cancer burden in the state of Vermont. We recognize that addressing the dual challenges of optimizing cancer care and mitigating financial consequences requires a multi-pronged approach. It involves robust policy action, as we mentioned, clinical practice changes, community engagement, and continued research. Rally Against Cancer Games, pictured here in the middle, are an annual campaign to raise awareness for cancer research taking place in our local community. So this year, to spread clinical trial awareness and to recognize my team's efforts in increasing patient enrollment into clinical trials by 86% from 2023 to 2024, we were honored before the basketball game by the athletic director. So no pressure, but this guy on the screen is actually right here at this table in the middle of the room. And so he's everyone's boss. And so I'm fortunate enough to have a reporting relationship into him, into our medical director, Dr. Stephen Addis. And recently we had Dr. Jessica Heath join as our newly appointed Associate Director of Clinical and Translational Research. Our goal as a clinical trials department is to broaden our cancer scope to more fully include the area of cancer prevention and control and emphasize the importance of our catchment area in both Vermont and New York. Our clinical research team is dedicated to bringing the latest advances in cancer care to our patients and our communities. Over the past few years, we have transformed how we do research at the University of Vermont Cancer Center. We've built a highly skilled research team that's here today that are focused on collaboration, accountability, and patient-centered care. We have new roles and training programs that help us meet growing research demands, while structured career paths ensure we attract and retain top talent. 10 of our team members earn national certification as clinical research professionals, and ongoing training ensures that we meet the highest standards in clinical research and patient safety. We've also modernized our research systems to make trials more efficient and accessible. Study activation times have improved significantly, meaning new trials are open and more patients have access to more trials. More clinical trials are now available across our health network as well. And our comprehensive monitoring and quality assurance programs ensure our patient safety. Through these efforts, we're building a clinical trials program that accelerates discoveries, advances our science, and ensures every patient has access to tomorrow's treatments today. So every breakthrough begins with someone who says yes to a clinical trial. By participating in cancer clinical trials, patients help advance science, improve care, and bring hope to future generations. Your participation matters today, tomorrow, and beyond. Thank you.
So we're very fortunate and grateful today to have Todd with us, who is currently participating in a UVM clinical trial. And so we're going to have a little bit of dialogue here about the experience on that trial, and then open up to all of you to ask questions of any of us about the clinical trial experience. So Todd, could you just share briefly a little about your cancer journey and what led you to consider participating in a clinical trial? Did you know what a clinical trial was before you were approached, and how you got started?
So I was diagnosed with CCRC, which is, I'm going to butcher this, which is like a kidney cancer. I was having pains on my left side, which is kind of funny. I thought I was passing a kidney stone. Went in for a CT scan, and they found this little surprise on my right kidney, which wound up being the CCRC. I had surgery, and right now my diagnosis is I'm cancer-free, which makes me very happy. And now they have me doing the Keytruda, and then I was approached to do this clinical trial, and I'm very nervous, so I have to put up with me a little bit. What influenced me to do this? 2 factors. One, I blame my wife. It's always a woman's fault. Anyhow, sorry. But I also wanted to participate because, excuse me. I also wanted to participate to give people hope. And golly, I didn't think I'd be this emotional. I wanted to give people hope. I didn't really know anything about the clinical trials. I just wanted to participate. I feel very fortunate in what I have been through and what I'm going through. I go in for my infusions, and I see a lot of people who are worse off than I am, and I just want to convey hope.
Thank you so much. Hope is such a powerful thing. Thank you. I'm always just awed and humbled by our patients who are willing to be as altruistic as you are, right? To participate in something bigger than yourself and make meaning in some way, hopefully, of this whole experience. So thank you for that.
Whew. So was there, going to shift it a little, was there anything you wish you had known beforehand that would have made the decision easier, other than having to spend multiple hours with me?
Well, you're really not all that bad, so. I really didn't know much about this. I was approached, I think somebody texted me and asked me to do this. I kind of had a brief discussion with my wife about it, but it was a definite yes. Now, as far as everything, I don't know, everybody has been really nice and kind, and have made me feel welcomed.
Thank you. Issa's waving. She was the one who approached you. We have a great team here. Are there things the team has done to make this easier? You know, we recognize that there can be challenges in participating in a clinical trial. It's time consuming. Often you have to travel to UVM to do some of the elements. Are there particular challenges you've noticed, and have there been ways the team supported you to work around that?
So I am beginning my journey, I guess, for lack of a better term. And a lot of the support that has been out there, that's been offered to me, I haven't used because I haven't come up to that. Everybody so far has been very friendly, and very nice, and very supporting about everything that I've done, including this event here.
So, has participating in a clinical trial changed how you think about cancer research?
Yes, it has, because, I mean, everybody wants to be cured and everybody wants to be cancer-free. But this, I look at this as being more of a journey than a destination. It's kind of like going on a road trip with your kids. You start off and everything seems to be okay, and then 5 minutes down, we need a potty break, or I'm hungry, or whatever. So some of the things that people who have been in the clinical trials, I have, the problems that they have come across, like the side effects and that, I have not really encountered yet. But I know that they're out there, and I'm sure I will get the support that I need when I need it.
If you were to meet somebody, maybe even in this room today, who has a new cancer diagnosis, is there anything you would want to share with them, or any advice you would give about how to consider a clinical trial, if that's something, you could enlighten us about advice for a new person on this journey?
Well, the first thing I want to say is don't lose hope. No matter how bad, don't lose hope. As far as doing a clinical trial, this being in front of you is probably the hardest thing that I've done so far.
Thank you.
I'm not a great orator, but I would just encourage him to do it. Just like the reasons why I'm doing it is to I guess, better my fellow man, to give hope, just to help out people and to help out the cause, and to make cancer cures better in some way, shape, or form.
Is there anything you'd like the audience to know about your journey that we haven't touched on? Other than your wife seems to be pretty amazing.
She's okay. No, seriously though, I mean, like I said, I feel honored and blessed to be here. For right now, my journey is new. I am cancer-free, but I know there's other people out there who are worse off. I go into my infusion session every day and I look around, and there's people there who are joyous and happy, and then there's people there that are sad. And I just want them to, to understand that there's always hope. I can't emphasize that enough. And far as participating in this, I think everybody should do it to give of themselves and to help further the journey so other people can be blessed as well.
Thank you. We'd love to open it up to the audience. We have a whole panel with Dr. Varnadoe as the director of the Clinical Trials Office, a patient, Todd, and I'm a physician who runs clinical trials, so happy to take questions from any perspective. Ren, you have a question?
It's not from me. We have a Zoom question, where someone asked, how does one find a clinical trial for a particular type of cancer in the US? And I do want to shout out, somebody in the chat already said clinicaltrials.gov as a good place to start. But are there any other resources that you can think of for people across the US for accessing clinical trials?
Thank you. I can start and happy to pass it to Dr. Varnadoe too. So clinicaltrials.gov is a great resource. It's run by the government, and every trial that opens in the US is required to be registered there. So it is comprehensive. It's also a little tricky to navigate. So if you don't know the buzzwords and you don't know exactly what to search for, it can be a lot to sift through. So while it's publicly available and a great resource, it's not the most user-friendly until you really get used to it. But it's a great place to start. I think other options, talk to your physicians for sure. The whole cancer team here at UVM and at other treatment centers often have a pretty good pulse on what's available for clinical trials. definitely locally, but usually regionally and nationally as well. And then there are some great patient advocacy organizations, things like the American Cancer Society and other groups that have nice resources for navigating and learning more about clinical trials. Anything you would add to that?
I just want to mention the American Cancer Society in particular. They have an amazing service where they help patients find clinical trials that match what cancer type they may have. And I've actually used it for my father and had a really great experience with that. Additionally, we recently revamped our University of Vermont Cancer Center clinical trials website, and we have a listing of our trials there as well that are available and open for participation here. But anyone may have information on your care team, and may know or may have knowledge, and if they don't know, they can find someone who does. So always ask that question.
I have a question for Todd. Cancer is pretty overwhelming, and when people, often when we talk to people about clinical trials, they're worried about what the burden would be for participating in a clinical trial, either the burden related to time that it might take related to being on a trial, or potentially whether there's any cost burden. And so I wondered if you can comment if you've felt that participating in a clinical trial has been a burden, and what you could share for people who may be concerned about something like that.
It hasn't been burdensome so much that my employer has allowed me to take time off or do whatever I need. I'm very fortunate as far as that goes. Far as doing the clinical trial itself, I don't feel burdened at all because I want to give. I mean, it's just a small part, and you show up, I have to come through town anyway. So it doesn't seem to be, it's not burden to me. It's not a burden to me.
I was just going to add one comment to that. Thank you so much for that answer. For those who are considering a clinical trial, almost all clinical trials do have some coverage plan for whatever the treatment may be. So this does not tend to add a lot of additional cost to your cancer care. Beyond normal copays for insurance and doctor's visits, trials are really required to have a plan for patients for any cost of additional medications or testing. So please ask the treatment team if there are any unanticipated costs, but this really should be part of the package of participating in the clinical trial for your volunteering.
And as a matter of fact, Vermont was one of the first states to adopt the Medicare mandate coverage for clinical trials.
I actually have two questions. Are some of the clinical trials, do they have, like some people are on a placebo and some people are on a real medication? And number two, do you think, like in my head, I guess sometimes I think there's a stigma like, oh, if you're in a clinical trial, you're really at the end of your rope, kind of. Do you think there's that stigma?
Those are excellent questions. So clinical trials are required to be designed in a way that does not give a patient less than what you would normally get. And so while there is the possibility of a placebo treatment, it's usually a placebo plus. So you might get the normal treatment for your cancer plus a placebo, or the normal treatment plus another drug. There's some sort of design there to ensure patients at a minimum get the standard of care for their cancer, and then potentially something over and above that or not. There are no cancer clinical trials that are designed in a way that would put a patient at risk of harm by not getting the treatments that are needed and known to be helpful for those cancers. And then, I think the stigma question is a good question. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. My perspective is there really are clinical trials that are intended to be designed at every phase of cancer. And so some are for people who are newly diagnosed, and it's part of that hope for a better start to this. Some are for when there's a relapse, thinking about, is there a way we could do this differently? And there are some clinical trials that are later in the course of the disease, but that's certainly not the majority of them, actually.
I don't feel like I'm at the end of my rope. This is the beginning of a journey, and right now I have a great diagnosis, and maybe someday it'll change, but I'm not that type of person who feels like I'm at the end of the rope, even though maybe someday that will happen.
And I'd just like to comment that my father has participated in multiple clinical trials and is many years into his cancer journey, and he's still alive because of the trials that he's participated in.
I have a comment and a question. One, my son was diagnosed with leukemia. He's now 35, but he was 7 at the time, and they approached us and said, a clinical trial. And my first thought is, oh my God, are they going to experiment? But then when they explained it, and for the altruistic reasons also, of course we're going to participate, and that has advanced the treatment for leukemia, 35 years ago, well, 25 now. And then I was thinking, I've diagnosed with breast cancer, and I'm also a snowbird. So say I look up a treatment here, a clinical trial here that I'd be eligible for, can I go back to another state and say, can you enroll me in this clinical trial?
That's an excellent question. And we're in Vermont. We have several snowbirds who, go to different places in the South. And we absolutely can do that. And so, what we do is we find an organization or a cancer center that has that trial, and, we try to find where it's closest to where you'll go down south. And we make contact, and we transfer wherever you are in your treatment. We transfer your care there. Then you pick right back up where you started from here. And then when you're ready to come back, they transfer you back.
I just wanted to add, now my sister's in Houston, so she's at MD Anderson, which was odd, one of those little triangles on an initial map. She has lung cancer. She's alive today because she has been in a series of clinical trials for targeted treatments. When it stops working, she's been fortunate enough to get on the next treatment. So it wasn't the end of her rope. It was another rope handed to her. She's had a variety of different side effects. Each one of them's different, et cetera, but she has helped to take the science forward. And again, I think, like you said, your father, it's the only reason she's still here. Now, what I wanted to ask, and you alluded to it here with the snowbird question, if someone, is it really in the world of clinical trials, it is then possible for you to manage to be on a clinical trial here that's really centered somewhere else entirely, that's where the researchers are, that they can do it, I'm going to say remotely, that is a doable thing?
There's a large variety of clinical trials, and a huge number of them are really based in cancer networks. So there are often trials that we have here at UVM that may be opened at 20, 50, 100 other cancer centers across the country. And so trials like that depend on a cancer network often are very transferable, where if you start treatment here and then you have to move, we can find a place close by that will do that. There are other trials that are more homegrown, if you will, like a unique path. Maybe we're studying something unique to cancer in Vermont that's only available here. And so you may hear that there are trials that you have to travel for in order to get access because they're not available in as many centers in a network, or maybe are unique to one place. So there's a little bit of variation there, but the cancer networks are very large, and we're here at UVM a member organization of several of these big consortium groups, so we're fortunate to have a lot of connections through that network across the country.
And to piggyback off of what Dr. Thomas has said, the majority of our patients do live in rural communities, and so We have several homegrown trials that are actually implemented completely remotely. They're done via telehealth or they're done over the phone. Consenting is even done online, and patients can participate anywhere within our catchment area, and they don't have to be here in order to be a part of that trial. And those are those trials I mentioned that are more focused on patients' quality of life and care that supports them, as opposed to drug-specific trials.
I'd just like to make a comment that I participated in a clinical trial, and this particular drug did not work, but my doctor took me out of the trial immediately, put me on something tried and true, and I'm fine. So that's reassuring in a way. But in the process, I couldn't help but notice what a huge outlay drug companies make to sponsor these trials. I was absolutely blown away. And I tend to be rather critical of drug companies as well, but this fact stood out, like how much of an investment it takes to develop a drug.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think the world of research and the world of clinical trials is probably one of the most positive relationships we have between physicians and healthcare workers, patients, and pharmaceutical companies, because in this case, it's really a common goal, right? It's really a common goal of trying to advance cancer care, find new treatments, and work together in ways that make that possible. So there can be a lot of really encouraging interaction with some of the sponsors for these trials.
And ultimately, as well, the patient you come first. Your safety comes first. And that is something that is in the fabric of everything that we do, regardless, is patient safety, patients first.
I'd like to speak to the distance question and the lady here raised. I'm also participating in a UVM clinical trial. And my understanding is that it was designed by a neurologist here. And the research center for my trial is in Utah. So I'm getting just about daily phone calls from the nurse practitioners who are doing the research in Salt Lake. And it hasn't been totally convenient because of the mountain time frame, but and we've missed a few days, and I'm not sure it's been totally a good representation of what's going on for me, because I have to actually report on my symptoms the day before our phone call. And at the end of that day, it's a little tricky because I'm already into my next day of symptoms. But all in all, it's been it's been comfortable, and I'm looking forward to hopefully some good results.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and just the honest perspective, right? I think Dr. Holcomb mentioned this, and clinical trials ask a lot of you, of patients, right? And often more time than what might be a regular doctor's visit, and sometimes more rigid time, right? Less flexibility in when you can be contacted or when you have to show up for something. So it is, it's with gratitude for your volunteerism, because it takes some effort. It is not necessarily exactly aligned with what care would otherwise be, and hopefully the benefit to you and to the future is worth it.
I'm wondering what systems, if any, are in place so that when someone is newly diagnosed with cancer, that they know where to look for these clinical trials, and they're not just relying on their care team to tell them, so that there's shared decision making. So yeah, that's.
Well, I can speak partly for that internally, and then I'll hand it to Dr. Varnadoe. So some of the things that we do within UVM that I think are very helpful is most patients who are newly diagnosed are presented at our tumor boards here. And so those are meetings of a group of physicians and researchers who come together and really review every new case. And it would include the doctor who is treating you, but also all of the other doctors within that specialty and related specialties. So medical oncology, surgery, radiation, various things, to sort of think comprehensively about each patient, about does this treatment plan make sense, and are there any clinical trials this patient would be eligible for? So we try to do an internal check for every patient to say, is there something this patient could qualify for that we should be offering? And then I think to the second part of the question, what can you do as a patient? I'll hand that to you for where to search.
There are several things in terms of proactively, searching for trials, and that we've begun to implement over the past several years. And we have community events where we do skin checks, and as a part of that, there's information where we're meeting our community, we're going into the community and proactively disseminating that information. There are events such as the Rally Against Cancer that we mentioned, where we focused on cancer clinical trials, and that information was disseminated and provided to our patients. I think, our website, historically, it wasn't up to date, and, and it wasn't easily accessible, and by just completely revamping that and patients having access to that, that has been a huge step forward to expanding that access to our patients. We've done news stories, we've done podcasts, we've done several events in the community where that information is disseminated out as well. And so, I think it's evolving and it's growing, and there will be more ways. And one of the things that our team does really, really well is collaborate. They collaborate with our clinics, with our physicians, with our tumor boards, with our many different people on the care team. And just by spreading that information, that's giving patients more access to more people who have that information where they can access, where they are able to have access to that.
All right,
Time
we
for
have time.
one last question.
One last question, yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to end this on probably a sour note. You had at the beginning a number of dollars in grant funds that were helping support the program. It was a pretty big number for a really small state. And I'm wondering about, with the federal administration not loving universities lately and changing some grants, how that's impacted your ability to continue along with the trials you have in way, as well as those that you had considered.
I would like to defer to Dr. Holcomb. Thank you for your question.
It's such a timely question.
The answer is yes. The federal issues are definitely impacting us. Clinical trials is a really high priority of ours, and we support lots of different kinds of activities in the Cancer Center. Clinical trials is one of them. Our patient care, of course. We do lots of education, we do lots of community outreach, and we do a lot of what we call fundamental research, both laboratory and population-based research. We have so far been able to put together funding to continue all of our programs without a major impact, but I will say that we've dipped into philanthropic reserves and talked to people about donations to continue to allow us to do that and to continue to grow and offer more and more for our patients. So I think the unsettled landscape at the federal government is definitely a concern, and it has not yet impacted the types of things that we can offer for patients, but we're all concerned that may be in the future, and we're working hard to try to prevent that. And thanks to this glorious panel, and especially to Todd.
Yes, thank you, panelists. For our virtual attendees, please be sure to be back online at 12:45 for the start of today's keynote address. In-person attendees, our lunch buffet is located in the Fireplace Lounge. We kindly ask for your patience as we all go through the buffet line. We'll have plenty of time to eat together, and our keynote presentation, The Emerging Crisis of Young Onset Colorectal Cancer, will begin promptly at 12:45. Thank you.